I've been saying for ages that staying in the EU is not staying in the current relationship we now have with the EU. The EU project is fluid. It's moving towards ever closer union. Look at the push recently for the dangerous fantasy of an EU army.
This is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true.
It's being pushed almost every day. Look at how Macron the other day was calling for an EU empire. The EU project is not stationary. You will lose your country if you stay in the EU. As anyone who's studied the EU will know, their objective is control. The ultimate goal is to control as many countries as possible by a fewer number of unelected people as possible, and getting rid of nationalism, and to remove the very idea of individual countries. And you have to admit they're doing a pretty good job. Not for the people living under their grass, mind. I voted to leave because of the power the EU have over us. They want to make countries states, like the United States of America. They openly want a United States of Europe. I didn't vote to have my country swallowed up by a Hitler-inspired union controlled by a few people that you can never hold to account. Did you? I knew exactly what I was voting for. I knew exactly what it meant to vote leave. I don't consider myself a sad old bitter, thick idiot leaver that the Remain-loving media would have me perceived as. When real idiots like Eddie Izzard were touring the country before the referendum, you know, he was getting down with the kids and all that, was he talking to them about the power the EU wields over us, or about the control they have over our lives? Was he talking about loss of sovereignty, or the power the unelected bureaucrats have, and that we can never hold them to account? Was he talking about how the EU dictate laws to their member states? No, this fucking idiot was talking to them about low flight costs and free roaming charges. Did the people who voted Remain really know what they were voting for? I'd say they had no fucking idea what voting for Remain actually meant, or will mean in the future. Anyway, have you seen this recently? The EU are gonna ban memes. Now, why do you think they want to ban memes? They're fun, they're creative, they're well put together. You would have thought the EU would love such a thing. No. You see, the thing with memes is they take the piss and they do damage to the person the meme is about. Take this one of Theresa May. I mean, jeez, look at her.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style. Hey, sexy lady.
This makes her look so stupid and even more of a laughing stock to people. The EU want them banned. If you can't beat them, ban them. That should be the EU's motto. They could just have the Commission create a new law to ban memes. Even if the EU Parliament voted it down, no matter, the Commission can still force member states to implement the law or face massive fines. Because that's how the EU works. The EU is nothing less than an open dictatorship. One that's run by Germany. Makes you wonder if he ever won the wars, didn't it? I also stumbled across this video recently. This is from another useless organisation that should be disbanded, as all it ever seems to do is sex traffic children, and that's the United Nations. Have a listen.
And I would like to say some words on the Global Compact on Migration. On the 10th and 11th of December, there will be an international congress in Marrakesh, Morocco, with regard to this Global Compact on Migration. And the participating countries are set to sign this agreement. And although this joint agreement isn't binding, it's still meant to be the legal framework on which the participating countries commit themselves to build new legislation. And one basic element of this new agreement is the extension of the definition of hate speech. The agreement wants to criminalize migration speech. Criticism of migration will become a criminal offense. And media outlets, and that also concerns you, that give room to criticism of migration can be shut down. The Compact for Migration is legalization of mass migration. It's declaring migration as a human right. So in fact, it will become impossible to criticize Ms. Merkel's welcome migrants politics without being at risk to be jailed for hate speech.
They want to jail you for criticising anything to do with migration. What? They want to shut down any media organisation that criticise immigration or allow a platform for people to criticise immigration. What? This is incredible. This is so totalitarian. This would mean that if you criticised anything about immigration, you could go to jail. Just think about that one for a minute. So you couldn't criticise the fact that most convicted attackers in Sweden are foreign-born. Immigrants, in other words. So you couldn't criticise the migrant gang sexual assaults on women in Cologne a few years back. So you couldn't criticise people being thrown out of their homes to make way for refugees. You couldn't even criticise the migrants that threatened to kill the people who bloody rescued them. On and on it goes. You couldn't criticise anything to do with migration unless you wanted to go to jail.
It will become impossible to criticize Ms. Merkel's welcome migrants politics without being at risk to be jailed for hate speech. To be jailed for hate speech. To be jailed for hate speech.
Stop and think about that for a minute. So again, the UN, another example of the dictatorship we live under. If you can't beat them, ban them and jail them. Is it hitting home yet? Is it hitting home just how authoritarian these organisations have become? How is it even possible, people? Are we going to stand for this? They want a law where they can arrest you for criticising immigration because they're losing the will of the people and they're losing the debate, so they want to close it down. The greatest way to make a dictator look like a dictator is to make him act like a dictator. The EU and the UN are exactly that, dictators. They need to be dissolved. Jesus, we're in so much trouble. What comes next? Are they going to ban breathing? And the sad part is, I know no media organisation that will voice an opinion about this because they'll be too bloody scared. Unless we collectively grow a pair of bollocks, people, we are seriously doomed.